If your life keeps returning to the same frustrations, the same disappointments, the same invisible wall, it's not fate. It's not bad luck. It's your standard. The universe is not a wish granter. It is a mirror. It doesn't hand you what you want. It gives you what you demand of yourself. And if all you demand is comfort, then comfort is all you'll ever receive. Your current reality is not shaped by your dreams, but by what you've tolerated. Mediocrity doesn't arrive like a storm. It creeps in like a whisper. This is enough. You don't need to try harder. But here's the hard truth. Your life will only ever rise to the baseline you've set, not the ceiling you fantasize about. Most people focus on what they hope to gain, but they ignore what they've agreed to settle for. What you tolerate becomes the soil where your life takes root. And roots don't lie. Raise your standard and you raise the soil. You raise the air around you. You raise the sunlight that feeds your actions. Suddenly you start saying no to things you once said yes to. You start expecting more of yourself, of your choices, of your surroundings. The quality of your thoughts sharpens. The quality of your discipline strengthens. And most importantly, the quality of people you allow into your space transforms. Let's be honest, how many people are still living in the echo chamber of excuses? They want better, but they refuse to require better from themselves. A man who never dares to raise his standard will forever be caged by his own permission, slip to stay small. What would happen if today you tore up that permission slip? What would change if you said, "This is who I am now, and I will no longer accept anything beneath it"? Because when you draw that line in the sand, you do more than announce your identity. You activate it. And the world begins to respond to the new frequency you emit, not of desire, but of decision. Your life is not a collection of wishes. It is a consequence of your allowances. What you tolerate, you inherit. Every compromise becomes a quiet contract silently signed by your inaction. And over time, these small allowances become your identity, not by intention, but by repetition. A man may dream of greatness, but if he tolerates laziness, excuses, or distraction, then that dream is dead before it ever takes its first breath. Why? Because his actions speak one language while his desires whisper another. And life does not respond to whispers. It answers to clarity. It obeys resolve. And resolve begins with standard. Your standard is not a motivational slogan. It is the invisible script that dictates how you move, how you think, how you choose, especially when no one is watching. When your standard is high, your life must rise to meet it. But when it is low, everything falls in line with that descent. Your habits, your peers, your progress. Nothing in your life stays neutral. It is either lifting you or draining you, strengthening you or softening you. Ask yourself, where have I allowed weakness to masquerade as kindness? Where have I accepted mediocrity in the name of humility? Because here's the truth. Most avoid when you lower your standard to avoid discomfort. You also lower your trajectory. You shrink your capacity. You teach the world that you are willing to dim. But when you raise your standard even silently, the world takes notice. You no longer need to demand excellence. You become it. And that shift doesn't just change your output, it changes your orbit. New people appear. New energy surrounds you. New outcomes begin to show up not because you got lucky, but because you became someone who would never again allow the version of you that once begged for less. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you embody, and you embody your standard. We often think greatness begins in grand gestures, but it never does. It begins in the smallest of choices repeated with honor. If you cannot command the first hour of your day, you will not command the direction of your life. It starts there, not in the applause, not on the stage, but in the shadows at 5 a.m. when the alarm rings and your comfort begs you to stay. What you do next is not about productivity, it is about identity. Do you keep your room in order? Do you rise with discipline or drift into the day? Do you follow through on the tiny promises no one else will ever see? Because if you can't finish the small, the world will never trust you with the large. Excellence is not built on explosions of effort. It is the accumulation of detail, of order, of quiet integrity. Picture this. One man stumbles into the day checking his phone before his feet hit the floor. He reacts. He delays. He is always catching up. Another man wakes with clarity. He irons his shirt with care, not for vanity, but for precision. He writes down 3 intentions, not tasks, but conquests. Not what he must do, but what he chooses to dominate. The first man answers to the world. The second man leads it. That difference. It is not talent. It is standard. We don't rise to meet our goals. We rise to meet our rituals. And your rituals begin in the mirror in how you brush your teeth, how you arrange your space, how you respect your word even when it's easy to dismiss. These are not meaningless acts. They are declarations. They are votes for the kind of man you are becoming. So the next time you leave your desk in disarray, the next time you delay a task you promised to finish, the next time you break a silent vow to yourself, ask, what standard am I reinforcing right now? Because every act is a sculpture, and you are the clay. Build with intention. Begin with small standards. They will lead you farther than ambition ever could. Every man lives by a code. The only difference is whether that code was chosen or inherited. If you have not written your code, you are living someone else's. And that borrowed script, rooted in mediocrity, passivity, and compromise, will never build the life you were born to create. Your standard is your code. It is the invisible armor you wear into every room, not to impress others, but to remain unshaken in who you are. A man who knows his code does not require reminders. He sharpens himself daily because he understands that dull tools build crooked legacies, and he refuses to leave behind anything but precision. Imagine a carpenter at dawn. He sharpens his blades not because someone demands it, but because he knows the consequence of neglect. He has built enough to know weak tools yield weak results. His legacy is not left to luck. It is shaped by edge, by clarity, by discipline. That is the power of standard. It transforms craft into calling, labor into legacy. Now ask yourself, what is your code? Is it written in the fire of intention or the ash of convenience? Are you the man who follows through when no one will ever notice? Are you the one who acts with discipline even when the reward is distant? Even when fatigue whispers that no one would blame you if you stopped? Because every time you bend your back when you could have stood tall, every time you abandon what you once promised yourself, you weaken your code. But when you hold the line, when you decide I walk into every room with purpose, or I never quit, or I speak only what is true, that line becomes your spine. It holds you upright when the world tries to fold you. The strongest structures are not visible from the outside. They're in the foundation. They are the unseen beams that carry weight, that resist the storm, that make others feel safe simply by existing. Your standard is one of those beams. Strengthen it. Because when your code becomes your signature, no man will mistake who you are or what you stand for. Most men chase elevation by lifting their dreams higher. They set goals that scrape the sky: more money, more prestige, more applause. But few ever consider this. The height of your life is not determined by the ceiling you aim for, but by the floor you refuse to fall beneath. You do not rise to your ambitions. You fall to your rituals. And that floor, the lowest level of behavior you allow from yourself on your worst day, will define the life you live. Because when life breaks your plans, when energy fades, when storms come uninvited, you do not perform at your peak. You perform at your base, and your base is built by standard. Excellence is not about the highlight reel. It's about the footage no one sees. It's who you are when you're tired, when you're overlooked, when you're alone. A man of true standard doesn't wait for ideal conditions to do what's right. He does it because it is who he is, even when the rewards are absent and the eyes are gone. So ask yourself, what does your worst day look like? Does it descend into distraction, laziness, and blame, or does it default to reflection, writing, preparation, growth? Does it still carry your character even when it lacks convenience? Picture the soldier who polishes his boots after marching for miles. Not because he's expected to, but because that's his code. That's his line. That's his standard. And that silent habit is louder than any speech. Because when your worst day still holds order, still holds purpose, still holds pride, you become unstoppable. You become reliable. And in a world full of men who only move when they feel good, that makes you rare. Here's a secret most never consider. If you raise your floor by 20%, your life may change by 200%. Why? Because consistency compounds, standards stack, and strength, when practiced in weakness, becomes unshakable. So don't just ask what your goals are. Ask what your minimums are. What is the bare minimum behavior you will accept from yourself and still call it a day worth living? Raise that, just that, and everything else will rise with it. A man who raises his standards doesn't just change his outcomes, he changes his identity. And with that identity, he changes who walks beside him. Because standards are magnetic. They attract the disciplined. They repel the passive. A man of conviction becomes a beacon not because he seeks attention, but because he refuses to dim his light. People are drawn to clarity. They are inspired by integrity. They feel safer around someone who doesn't sway with the winds of opinion, who doesn't shrink to make others comfortable. A man of standards doesn't chase applause. He commands respect quietly, naturally, powerfully. He speaks less but says more. He listens more but yields less. And through his very presence, he invites those around him to elevate. Not through demands, not through speeches, but through the power of example. But don't be mistaken, this path does not come without resistance. The world may not always celebrate your standards. In fact, some will mock them, misunderstand them, even resent them. Why? Because your refusal to lower your line exposes where they've drawn none. Your discipline becomes a mirror, and not everyone enjoys what they see in reflection. Yet this is how leaders are born. Not in ease, but in endurance. Not in approval, but in alignment. Your standard lived out loud becomes a signal, and those who carry fire in their bones, truth in their hearts, they will find you. They will recognize you. Because like attracts like. And when a man declares, "This is who I am. This is what I allow," the right people rise to meet him. The wrong ones fall away. This is not arrogance. It's alignment. And alignment is what gives a man power, not just over his own life, but over the room he walks into, the culture. He influences the legacy he leaves behind. So raise your standard not only for yourself, but for those watching you. Because when you choose strength, you give others permission to choose it too. When you embody truth, you give others the courage to live it. And when you live as an example, you no longer have to seek a tribe. Your standard builds one around you. A hidden standard has no power. A value whispered in secrecy holds no weight in the storm. If your code only exists in private, it will vanish when pressure rises. True standards are not concealed. They are declared through action, through consistency, through visibility. It's easy to believe something when no one challenges you. It's easy to be principled when there's no temptation. But a man of conviction does not tuck his integrity into the pages of a private journal. He walks it out in daylight. He lives it in a way that requires no explanation. His presence becomes his proclamation. Imagine this. A teacher walks into the classroom, not shouting, not demanding attention. Yet the room quiets. The students straighten. Why? Not out of fear, but out of reverence. His shirt is pressed. His back is straight. His demeanor speaks, excellence lives here. That's not charisma. That's standard. Lived, not said. When your code becomes visible, it does something profound. It holds you accountable. It builds trust. And it gives permission to others to rise. But if you hide it, if your discipline lives only in isolation, you leave room for compromise. You allow temptation to rewrite your code in moments of fatigue. You leave your identity vulnerable to emotion. Don't let your integrity be conditional. Don't let your values fade when applause stops or when resistance begins. Because the moment you betray your standard for convenience, you teach the world that your word is flexible. And when your word bends, your influence breaks. So how do you make your standards public? You live them. You show up early. You speak with care. You finish what you start. You return to your principles even when the world forgets them, especially when the world forgets them. You build silently, but you live loudly. Let your home reflect order. Let your posture reflect dignity. Let your tone reflect peace. Let your calendar reflect intention. When others see this, when they feel this, they don't need a speech. They don't need to be convinced, because your life becomes the message. The moment of testing is never the time to set your standard. By the time the wind howls and the pressure mounts, it's already too late to build the foundation. You must already be standing on it. Most men wait. They wait until life demands a choice. And when that moment arrives, they panic. They weigh their options. They hesitate. But not the man who has already decided. Not the man who in the quiet hours of solitude carved his code in stone. This is the secret of strength, predetermined decisions. They eliminate debate. They remove hesitation. They silence doubt before it ever speaks. A man who knows in advance how he will act when tempted does not need to pause. A man who knows what he will not tolerate from himself does not require a reminder. He simply honors the decision already made. You must decide now before fatigue sets in, before discouragement knocks, before life demands your response. Decide now how you will show up when no one is watching. Decide how you will handle failure, betrayal, setbacks. Will you bend, or will you stand? Will you hide, or will you hold the line? Because here's the truth. The world will not wait for you to find your strength. It will test you without mercy. It will not pause to let you figure it out. It will strike at your weakest moment. And the only defense is a standard that was forged before the battle. Picture the judge who enters the courtroom not to deliberate, but to execute what is already written. He does not waver. His law is clear. So his justice is swift. That's what your internal code must become: clear, established, unwavering. So ask yourself, where in your life are you still leaving decisions open? Where are you telling yourself, I'll know what to do when the time comes, because you won't? You'll default to the easiest option, not the highest one. Decide before the emotion. Decide before the fatigue. Decide before the pressure. Because the man who decides in peace walks in power when the war begins. Write your standard now. Carve it deep. And when the storm arrives, let it find you already anchored. The world celebrates brilliance, but it is built by consistency. Not the kind that flashes, but the kind that endures. Not the kind that shows up when motivation is high, but the kind that returns day after day when no one sees, when no one claps, when no one cares. Greatness is not a moment. It is a pattern. The man who rises above the rest is not the most gifted, he is the most grounded. He's the one who shows up when others vanish. He's the one who repeats right action long enough for it to become second nature. His strength lies not in how loud he can roar, but in how quietly he can persist. Picture the farmer who waters his soil every day, week after week. Nothing grows. The ground stays still. The neighbors mock him, but he keeps going not because he sees progress, but because he trusts the process. And one day the harvest comes not as a surprise, but as a result, because the seeds were always there. The consistency was always the signal. You are the same. Your habits are the seeds of your future. Your rituals are the rehearsals for your destiny. And your discipline is the down payment on the life you say you want. Are you building resilience or regret? Are your actions laying bricks of strength or carving out cracks of compromise? You cannot choose both. Excellence does not tolerate indecision. If you wait to feel like it, you'll never master it. If you wait for clarity, you'll never begin. The man who lives by standard starts small but repeats relentlessly until it's who he is, until his body moves before his mind hesitates, until his environment bends to follow his momentum. And then something shifts. Confidence rises. Identity locks in. He no longer needs to convince himself. His standard speaks for him. This is how legacies are built by men who do what's right even when it's quiet, even when it's boring, even when it's lonely. Especially then. So show up. Not once, but always. Let repetition become your rhythm. Let discipline become your identity. Because consistency is not just a habit. It is the hidden engine that powers everything great. Elevation demands elimination. You cannot carry everything with you and expect to climb. Not every habit, not every belief, not every person belongs on the journey to your next level. To rise, you must release. This is where most men get stuck. They want more, but they won't let go. They cling to old patterns, to old comforts, to old alliances that once made sense in a season they've outgrown. And then they wonder why the summit feels out of reach. You cannot pack for the mountain like you're living in the valley. The air is thinner up here. The margin is smaller. The weight matters. Every distraction you carry slows you down. Every excuse you keep sabotages your strength. Growth isn't just about adding new layers. It's about shedding old skins. It will hurt. You'll feel the sting of letting go of people who once meant everything, of routines that once gave you security, of mindsets that once kept you safe. But what once protected you may now be poisoning you. And the longer you delay the release, the heavier the climb becomes. Picture a man boarding a ship to a new world. The captain says, "Only bring what's necessary." The man looks at his bags full of relics, comforts, attachments, and in that moment, he must choose the familiar or the future. Most hesitate. Few step forward, lighter, freer, resolved. You must become one of the few. Inspect your life like a builder checks his scaffolding. What supports are rotting beneath the surface? What emotional weight are you justifying? What relationships are keeping you soft when your calling demands you be sharp? Release does not mean rejection. It means realignment. It means saying, I love what was, but I am loyal to what's becoming. And if that costs you comfort, so be it. Better a brief moment of pain than a lifetime of potential never realized. Let go of the unnecessary. Let go of the outdated. Let go of what no longer fits the future version of you. Because your elevation will not come from holding on. It will come from releasing. Lighten your load, sharpen your focus, and rise. Walk into a man's space and you will hear the truth. He never speaks. The condition of his environment is the reflection of his inner world. It tells you what he values, what he allows, what he tolerates. Because your surroundings are not passive, they are active. They shape you. They train you. They whisper to you every day. This is who you are. A cluttered room reflects a cluttered mind. A chaotic workspace reflects scattered focus. Dirty clothes, disordered schedules, neglected tools. None of these are accidents. They are silent confessions, not of laziness, but of standard. A man who respects his mission builds a space that honors it. He surrounds himself with order not for vanity, but for alignment. His tools are ready. His desk is clear. His time is protected. Not because he is obsessed with control, but because he understands the path to greatness begins beneath your feet. Imagine walking into the study of a leader. Every object has purpose. Every book is placed with intention. There is silence, but not emptiness. There is stillness, but not stagnation. There is presence. A presence that says, this man is building something, and you feel it before he says a word. Now ask yourself, what does your space say about you? Do your walls inspire or distract? Do your habits thrive in this space or collapse? If someone judged your vision based on your environment, what would they assume? Because your room is not just a room. Your phone is not just a phone. Your calendar is not just a schedule. They are mirrors. They shout what you silently allow. So cleanse the space. Remove what insults your ambition. Add what elevates your mind. Don't wait for motivation to organize your world. Use discipline to demand it now. Build a temple around your vision. Make every object echo your intention. Because the environment you create will either train you to tolerate less or silently convince you to accept average. Set the standard. Then, let the room reflect it. There is no strength without self-respect, and there is no self-respect without a standard. Every time you break your own word, every time you say, "I will," and then don't, you send a quiet message to yourself. My promise is flexible. And that whisper repeated enough becomes a roar. It chips away at your core, your power, your leadership. Until one day you wake up unable to trust your own voice. Self-respect is not built in public. It's built in private. In the choices no one sees. In the moments no one applauds. It's forged when you do the right thing, not because it's rewarding, but because it's required. By who? By you. You cannot outsource self-worth. The world cannot give you what you will not give yourself. Compliments fade. Applause dies. But the feeling of being aligned with your own word, that feeling builds an unshakable confidence. It makes you walk taller. It silences doubt. It commands quiet authority. Picture a builder laying stone for a foundation. He measures twice. He aligns with care. Not because someone is watching, but because he is. And that's enough. Years later, no one will remember how long it took. But they will walk on the foundation and never feel a crack. That is what your standard does. It holds you steady when no one is looking. Where have you betrayed your own standard? Where have you whispered, "I'll change," but changed nothing? This is not a time for shame. This is a time for clarity, because you cannot fix what you won't face. And a cracked foundation cannot support the future you're called to build. Reclaim your line. Restore your standard. Say again without apology, "This is who I am. This is what I expect. This is what I do." Whether praised or pressured, whether celebrated or challenged. Because when you earn your own respect, no one can take it from you. And once you hold that power, others will either rise to meet it or fall away in silence. The man who honors his standard teaches the world how to treat him, not with words, with presence. You are the first and loudest example of how the world should interact with you. People don't follow what you request, they follow what you allow. They don't believe what you say. They believe what you tolerate. And your tolerance over time becomes your instruction manual to the world. If you accept disrespect, the world assumes you prefer peace over self-worth. If you excuse lateness, others will assume your time holds no value. If you abandon your own boundaries for comfort or approval, you are training others to do the same. Not through lectures, but through your life. That's the quiet truth. Your standard is not just your shield. It is your signal. A silent but powerful message that says, "This is what I expect. This is what I allow. This is how I operate." And when you live with that kind of clarity consistently, you will no longer need to demand respect. You will command it, not with force, but with alignment, not through ego, but through integrity. Imagine a craftsman. He inspects every detail, not just the product, but the process. He won't ship a single item until it reflects his precision. He doesn't beg clients to respect his work. He doesn't need to. The work itself teaches them how to respond. His example sets the bar. You do the same in your friendships, in your relationships, at your job. You're always teaching, not with speeches, with standards, not with ultimatums, with consistency. Ask yourself, where have I allowed others to set the tone? Where have I lowered my bar to avoid conflict? Where have I made excuses for behavior that insults my future? And then decide what would change if my very presence became a line others could feel. What would shift if my discipline said more than my words ever could? You don't need to beg others to honor your boundaries. Just live them. And those who cannot rise to meet your level will step aside on their own. That is not harshness. That is clarity. And clarity lived long enough becomes culture. Anyone can set a standard in silence. Anyone can declare discipline in peace. But it's not the whisper of your intentions that defines you. It's what remains standing when the pressure hits. The real test is never the calm. It's the chaos. When the storm comes, when fatigue sets in, when temptation knocks hard, what do? Do you hold the line, or do you fold into the comfort you swore you'd outgrow? This is where most fall, not because they lack vision, but because they never made their values visible, audible, unshakable. They wrote their standard in the sand, not in stone. And so when the winds rose, so did their compromise. But the rare man, the rare leader writes his code in solitude, carves it deep in stillness. He does not wait for challenge to decide who he is. He builds that decision before the trial comes. Picture the general who walks the battlefield in advance. Before the army arrives, he studies the terrain. Every hill, every shadow, every weakness. He imagines the enemy before it appears. And because of that foresight, he is ready not because he is fearless, but because he is forged. You must do the same. Sit with your values before life tests them. Speak your code aloud before the world demands proof. Decide in advance, when I'm tired, I still finish. When I'm offended, I still lead. When I'm alone, I still honor my integrity. Because when the moment comes, and it will, you won't have time to negotiate. You will either act or fold. And the only thing that determines which is whether you've trained your reflexes to mirror your standards. The fire does not build the sword. It reveals whether the blade was tempered correctly. Your storm is coming, not as punishment, but as proof. Let it come, and let it find you ready, not reactive, revealing. You may think you live only for today, for your job, your goals, your next milestone. But the truth is deeper. You live for the echo of your life, for the ripple that moves through others long after your voice has gone silent. Your standards are not just rules, they are blueprints. They are the unseen architecture of legacy. Every habit you build, every discipline you uphold, every promise you keep or break it, doesn't just shape you. It shapes what comes after you. It shapes what others expect of themselves because they saw what you expected of you. Legacy is not loud. It's not a title, a statue, or applause. Legacy is silent repetition. It's the unseen routine. It's the code so consistent that it becomes tradition. Picture a craftsman. He never sought fame. He just did his work with excellence, every cut precise, every line straight. Decades later, others hold his tools, follow his process, echo his standard. Not because he shouted, but because he showed. That can be you. Your standard lived clearly becomes the compass for others. You don't need to raise your voice. You need to raise your conduct. You don't need a spotlight. You need a spine. And the world will follow what they feel more than what they hear. Ask yourself, what are you passing down right now without realizing it? What habits? What language? What level of care? Because someone is watching. A son, a student, a teammate, a stranger. They are learning from your standard. They are absorbing your expectations. They are inheriting your definition of what's acceptable. And what if, just what if, that standard you set today becomes the legacy someone else builds on tomorrow? You were never meant to live only for yourself. And your values, when lived with consistency, will outlast your presence. Raise your standard and raise generations. Every man worships something. The question is not if, but what. Worship is not confined to temples or rituals. It lives in repetition, in your unseen choices, in your sacred routines. The altar is your calendar. The prayer is your discipline. And the God you serve is whatever you sacrifice your energy, time, and attention to. If you rise at dawn to pursue excellence, you worship purpose. If you guard your mind from distraction, you worship clarity. If you hold your word sacred, even when no one would know if you broke it, you worship integrity. But if you sacrifice your time for pleasure and not principle, then you've already declared your loyalty. If you protect comfort over calling, then comfort is your idol. And the truth is, what you protect the most is what you actually revere. Picture a monk sweeping the floor each morning. No one watching, no praise expected. But to him, the broom is holy. Every stroke is devotion, not because of what the task is, but because of the presence he brings to it. That is worship. That is reverence. Your life can be the same. You don't need to raise your hands to raise your standards. You don't need to chant to live with conviction. You simply need to treat your decisions like they matter because they do. Your standard is your sermon. Your habits are your hymns. And every act of discipline, every quiet resistance against laziness, every choice to tell the truth when a lie would be easier, that is the sound of your life praying out loud. So ask yourself honestly, what does your life bow to? Do your actions exalt strength or settle for softness? Do your choices serve fear or reflect faith? Because in the end, we are not defined by what we say we believe. We are defined by what we live like we believe. Raise your standard to the level of something sacred. Let it be your altar. Let it be your prayer. Let it be your proof. And let your life be the loudest whisper of what you truly worship.